Hello. So today we are doing ad hoc knowledge transfer session about Keptn Tutorials and how to develop them. I will share my screen and show how it works, and thanks to everyone for joining. So try to do more such knowledge transfers going further. Do you see my screen?
Yes. Are we recording?
Yes, we are. I'm just
Okay.
recording locally, so you probably see the status.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah, so we will be looking at tutorials Keptn SH. First of all, feel free to interrupt me at any moment. So it's an informal session. It's mostly for Q&A. I also started a Google Doc. So if you want to make some notes, etc., I'll just make it editable for everyone. So feel free to just put notes there, and then probably Mac or somebody could take an action item to update the contributing guidelines, because right now, let's say, they're a bit difficult to understand. Okay. So what do we see here? So here we basically see a set of tutorials available. And for each tutorial, if you go, you can see that there are multiple steps you have to pass through. And if you complete these steps, you basically can complete the tutorial. Also, we have support for multiple versions. So for example, if you go to 0.7, you can see that there is a lot more tutorials which have been written at some time, including Cargo CD, AWS, GC, Natus Engine, etc. So there were a lot of tutorials, but for recent versions, there are much less. And one of the reasons for that is that they are super hard to maintain at the moment due to many reasons. And yeah, it's one of the problems we have in the community. Also, if you go to tutorials, so when I was working on them in December, I spent some time to streamline Keptn and Prometheus, because even if they were present, they were not working for users. Set up some learning paths, etc. But generally, these tutorials are still a big problem for us. And thanks to everyone looking into them.
Right.
I'll show how they are organized internally at the moment. Full disclaimer, I would be happy to completely rework the engine. We have a pending task of moving everything to Antora and hence to ASCII Doctor, so that we could remove duplication, introduce common macros, etc., etc. Right now, it's not there. So I will show how it's implemented now. We have a repository, Keptn Tutorials. These tutorials are basically based on Google Codelab, at least some bits of these tutorials. So Google Codelabs is a project where basically they have a bunch of tutorials. So you see a familiar interface. It's open source project. The problem with that is that we actually have a copy of that. So we are not really using the recent version. We use older one, and there is no real support for us to even update the version, because it's just a part of the same repository. So it's basically a hard fork for us, and just unwrapping the things would be a challenge. This is why you can see various files like build Bazel here. So because Google uses Bazel to build everything, I have no idea where it even works for the website. So I'm going to show how it works actually for us right now. So what we have, well, I think it actually works, but yeah, it's a separate story. So what we have now, you can see that there is contributing MD, Readme MD here. These files again are mostly copied from Codelabs, and you can easily see it if you go to raw tutorial, because yeah, there is some entry level for Keptn, but basically the most of tutorials are commented out Codelabs. They're still there, they're just commented. And yeah, there are some other things, but basically this very, very basic introduction guide. Also, we have contributing MD on the top level, and contributing MD is a copy of Codelabs. It hasn't been updated. It has zero relevance to this tutorials repository at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, this is why I didn't want you to explore it on your own, because yeah, it's a bit complicated. So what we have else here? We have site. So site is basically content that actually gets published. You can see that now there is Gulf file, etc. And there gets some hint how to actually get it running. So this README is what you need to follow if you want to get it running. So npm install would set up the environment for you. Well, mostly because due to reasons unknown, for example, it doesn't install Gulp, so you would have to install it manually. But basically, to do the development, you have to follow this guide. So tutorials site, Codelabs, and yeah, this is something you can follow. Also, I believe there was another contributing MD somewhere, but okay, let's stop on that. So the tricky part about that, in principle, you can develop on both Linux and Windows, but it's not how it's going to work in this particular case. Because as I said, we use Markdown, so our tutorials look like that. So you can see a bunch of stuff. And yeah, you can already see what one of the problems is duplication. So for example, Keptn full to Dana trace, it doesn't exist for previous version, for 13th version. But for example, if you open Prometheus, it exists. And you can see how many versions, and basically all of them are copy and paste. So if you open 13th, you can actually see a bunch of content, including images, etc. Images are not copy and paste. Images are stored in a separate location. And you can also see some macros. So basically, Codelabs tries to work around some limitations of Markdown by adding some additional functionality on the top of it. So basically, it's pattern matching and also all the snippets. So where snippets are located, there is a snippets directory, and you can see that snippets are also duplicated. So for every version, you have to copy paste all the snippets. So Giovanni did it 7 days ago for version 13, and you can see that there is a bunch of content there. So including some files like feedback MD, which obviously have no reasoning to be snippets. It's just a matter of the current site architecture to get it working. Pretty much what else we have in the snippets. We also have some files like setup quality gate, etc. It's also in snippets because it's referenced a few times from the tutorial. So they decided to actually extract it. Again, it's if we had a ASCII doctor, if we had Antora, macros, it could have been done with native tools quite easily. But this is how it's implemented now. And yeah, it's quite a challenge to go through that. So these are snippets. And yeah, there is a bunch of them. So basically, there is no particular structure. So everything you want to duplicate goes here. At the same time, there is no macros, for example, for versions, etc. So when you copy the things, you actually have to copy all the stuff. And sometimes you have to ensure that the links are correct. For example, here you can see that
the links are going to 11, by the way.
Sorry?
Oh, there was one that's going to 13. Okay.
Yeah.
So
here,
all the links I found are going to version 11.
Well, so it depends because you have to manually update the things. So obviously, sometimes it gets missed. Sometimes it just becomes a mess. So this part could have been actually moved to templates legitimately, because this is what are templates for. You could have a macros here that updates version, etc. This is what I wanted to do, but the more I look at the site, I just want to burn it with fire and build the new one from scratch. Well, it was really good for the initial time when we needed to bootstrap the project, but now it definitely hits a lot of scalability concerns. Okay, so what else important about the tutorials? You can see that we are using Cloud is basically a part of Codelab, which basically does bits of the build. And here's one of the limitations coming that, well, basically you need to use one of the platforms supported by Cloud. And even if you have Windows here, it's not actually going to work right now, because right now, in order to build all this happiness, all these macros, etc., you need this script. And this script supports only Linux and macOS. So if you run on Windows, well, you can update the script if you want, or you can use BSL2. I choose the latter option for that. So basically, you can also see that there are some interesting things like putting Google Analytics right here in the script, etc. I'm not sure from where it comes. Well, you can take blame, but yeah, I guess it's Jürgen who did it at some point. So yeah, the structure of all this thing is a bit difficult, but actually it works. So if you really want to get it running, it's not enough to just run a gulp file like documented here, because gulp file won't serve you tutorials. You firstly need to run builder to generate the final tutorials. I will show you how it looks like in the code in a second. So I'm using PSL. See my screen? Or I guess I should make it bigger, right?
Yeah, I'm squinting to. Oh, that's nice.
Okay, so yeah, how it looks like. Yeah, so basically we have this site. You can see that there is a bunch of additional change files here already.
PWD, can you give us PWD?
Sorry?
PWD, can you give us a PWD? Oh, Keptn Tutorials site, is that where we are?
Yeah, so
Okay.
tutorial site. Yeah, and here we have tutorials. So first of all, we go to tutorials, and yeah, here's all this happiness. Yeah. So Mike, if you use so you use VI as a main editor, right?
Yes.
You have a problem for this particular repository.
Oh,
but yeah, we have builder sh. So this is the same file I've shown. Which, let me check what is in our history. So 25th, so it's something fresh. Okay. So first of all, you need to run this builder sh. I believe it's bash. Okay. And yeah, you can see that already you have some interesting events happening on my clean build, because, for example, snippet is missing. I have no idea why. Let's say.
The number is wrong. So basically, somebody did snippets with 0, 10, and then they continued with 11 and 12. I had the same issue yesterday.
Okay, so basically it means that the repository is already bogus. So we can fix it while we go. Okay. So okay. So yeah, it's not going to be an easy thing right now, but okay, I'll just hack around and then I will submit a proper fix. I guess it's not going to help because which file? So we reference basically both files. Okay, then I will definitely fix it later. But yeah, so in theory, you run this builder and then it prepares all the content that it actually can serve. Yeah, so and to serve it, we actually use gulp. So for gulp, we have, by the way, it doesn't fully clean up when you run rebuild, which is also a problem because if something is wrong, you have a kind of messed up tutorial. Okay. So for Readme, yeah, you basically see all the commands there. So after you build the tutorials, you first need npm install. So you get all these tools. And you also need gulp. So in gulp, there are two ways actually. So you can use a gulp serve. I don't think you would need a dist, and you can see that you can do some filters, etc. Also, there are commands which basically allow for live editing. So it's also somewhere here. Some commands are just useless, like publish, etc. None of it is really configured for local environment. It's configured for CD. And just run a gulp serve. Not here. So it's PowerShell. Sorry. Okay. So I'll launch gulp serve. It's actually quite quick, and now we have on localhost. And here our development is our development version of these tutorials.
Okay, localhost 8000.
Yeah, now it's a default. You can configure that. So basically, you get this version. You can browse all the changes, etc. Again, now I have no idea what's happening. For example, to version 12. I guess, well, we can see feedback. So something gets generated, but again, I'm not sure how it works with the snippets, what is broken, what's not. So currently my repository should be a complete mess. And actually, if you run the script without -ex, I guess it actually gets generated. I'm not sure. But we can try. Price minute following URL. What? That's also interesting.
Huh.
Panic. No such file in directory, but you can see that he doesn't actually even break if you run in such mode. And here, I guess something is hard-coded. So Marky Mark is basically this templating engine. But why the heck it needs to authorize to Google Drive, I don't know. And I have strong suspicion that it's Jürgen's Google Drive. So Jürgen used to work for Dynatrace, then he left. So my bet is that after his account got deleted, this thing doesn't work.
Oi.
Yeah. So again, I have no idea what exactly that. I will take a look. Yeah. Welcome. So yeah, again, it was a really nice implementation for the time being, but right now we definitely keep all the technical debt we accumulated there. So for live development, if you use Linux or macOS, you are perfectly fine. You can just develop locally, you can browse other things. For Windows, it's a bit more complicated because for Windows, you either need to mount a directory. And one of the things there that by default, if you use VSL2, so you can just go to Linux, Ubuntu, what is it? Home on Inashev. And yeah, here basically you have Keptn Tutorials. So this is my running repository. So in theory, I could just edit this path, but the problem that it uses UNC by default. So by default, some tools like Visual Studio Code won't work with this directory. So you would need to actually configure mapping and volume so that mount. I don't, yeah, it's mapping actually on Windows. So you would need to map this repository if you want to edit it in Visual Studio Code. Otherwise, it won't work. We can do mapping now if you want, or we can just try to do the bypass. I think it's better to actually map this directory because otherwise I will be hitting this crap every time.
Hi, Maya.
I can actually figure it out later because I don't remember how to map it on Windows. Well, I guess just map command would work. I haven't done it for quite a while. map. Okay, I'll take it offline. But yeah, generally my recommendation, if you want to do development, I will just connect to my repository. So this is basically the same repository, but it's local. So I usually do development just in Visual Studio Code because it provides a decent level of markdown, browsing, previews, etc. Obviously, none of that really works with tutorials, with Cloud, with all this templating. So you don't get support for that at all. You would need to rebuild with build SH every time. And that's also broken by now. So I guess we will need to do a lot of hot fixes to just get the contributing flow running right now. Basically, this is what we have. So for editing, I think that any browser, any code editing repository would work. Okay, any questions, comments?
There's so much. Can you go back to the main, like where you go into the Prometheus, the full tour or whatever?
Okay.
There's another weird thing there that, I mean, just from a usability thing, the display of it, the rendered.
Okay. Yeah, actually. Okay, I'm opening this. Just a second. This prop. Okay. So you see my screen? Yeah, here you see
Okay.
basically the layout. You can see that some bits are already tricky and not really syntactically right. So for example, even here, you can see that renderer breaks because yeah, this is how Markdown works. Again, it totally depends on your engine, but syntax-wise, it's not correct. And here, if you go, you can see all the snippet. Basically, it's just a double opening bracket, and that's it.
Right. Go on. I want, there's a specific thing here happening in this tutorial that's also bizarre. Just construct, but it's in, go to like the next section or something. I think it's not in the welcome section, but in most of the others, it's there.
Yeah, you can see that actually all these sections are in snippets. So because yeah, we have multiple tutorials, and yeah, all of them are kind of copy pasted. So here
Right.
we have to go to snippets, then snippets 13, and for example, here's our installation guide, which is the most of the tutorial. Here, for example, we take Istio. Yeah, so you can see that it's install Istio, and then it's a second level of index. So what happens with Codelab when it is indenting, etc.? It actually creates additional steps. So on tutorials, it's Keptn full. So this is how it looks like. So install Istio, step number 3, but it gets does it automatically from a single Markdown file.
Right. Okay, I want to see, most of these files have a link that's going into another document. And it's very bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also you can see that there is some timing calculation. So this timing calculation is again some magic applied by Codelabs. So here you have duration 10 minutes, and Codelabs parses it and automatically tracks it. Obviously, whether it's 10 minutes or not, it's a separate story, but yeah, this is what you have. Pretty much the same for other entries. All of that are more or less legit Markdown files with some templating, but generally it's Markdown. One thing that's worth mentioning, I already opened it. So there are additional files like, for example, full tour Prometheus 11. Actually, it's a good question why we don't have 12 and 13. maybe I'm just using old version. So actually, if you open 13, it's right. We don't have. We have full tour on Prometheus for 13. It's actually quite interesting because we have no Codelab file for that. Okay, we will figure out it later. But you can see that there are also some Codelab files. So it's basically additional metadata. It shows how to actually pass through the things. And it defines an entry point for that. So you can see URL, you can see feedback, metadata, etc., and also tags. So tags are what used. So you can see advanced, and advanced gets mapped to this level advanced. Again, it's a kind of hard-coded logic that allows to capture where is what. Pretty much the same. So for log, etc., all of the goes from this file, and it's how it gets constructed. Also, another part which you can see that there are some Codelab tutorials right inside, but I'm skipping for now. There is another file here called on the top level. Snippet below all of that. I haven't worked with this repository for quite a while, but there is another configuration file on the top level. Just a second, I will just open one of my patches so that I remember where I actually put the things, because yeah, maybe the repository structure changed. Okay. Disable the Keptn live demo. So basically, it's my pull request that stopped working at some point. Actually, this is also I wanted to look into. So you can see that there is also site up views. So in addition to all this metadata, there is also up views, and it basically defines all the views for tutorials. So this is, for example, the default one. So basically, this is the page we open when we load it. So this one. Here you can see that there are also some files. So for example, there is view.json, which basically provides some different options, etc. So for example, here you can see that there are some tutorials pinned. You can see that these pins, well, don't make much sense these days. So they are outdated. We also open 11s by default. So when you open the default page right now, 11s is when I was updating the site, but then it was Johannes and Giovanni doing that, and looks like they forgot to modify. So here by default, we go to tutorials for 11s, not for 13s. And this is one of the problems I'd say we also need to fix. Yeah.
I think there's also a problem with, if you go back to the tutorial site, to the web page, if you click on Keptn version 6 or something, and then from take the Prometheus tutorial, look to the left, first one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, well, it can.
Okay, because I saw some problem yesterday there that some of the versions were not, I think some of them were removed. So 6, 7, and 8 or something like that.
Well, yeah, it's probably some of the versions were removed. But here, one of the problems is that it has no version tag at all, because basically it was the first version of Keptn when all this engine was introduced. And basically, when they needed a new version, instead of redesigning the site, it was basically extensive. So just copy whatever files, and it has been extensive ever since. So every month there is a bunch of copy paste across all these repositories, and basically one could get completely lost.
So why do we still have pages on the web for tutorials for versions that we've removed from the documentation? Why aren't we removing
Nobody
those from the
cleans that
tutorials?
up.
Huh?
because nobody cleans it up.
Okay, so it's,
Yeah, also tutorials works in funny ways. So sometimes I mean Codelabs. So I'm pretty sure that these versions were hidden before, but now they appear. And for example, in my case, I tried to hide explore Keptn without installation, and it was hidden for some time, but now it appears here. So basically, this patch which I was showing to you, closed it, but the patch which removed this tutorial after we disabled the public demo, it stopped working. Again, this amount of different bugs in the build script without checking, I have no idea what exactly breaks. But by now, I assume that our engine is half broken. Still displays the things, but yeah, that's it. So what is important about these views? That yeah, you can see that there are some such visualizations, and for example, view. So it's also view for version 13. So this is a version selector. Basically, this version selector you have is just switcher of views from Codelab. And here, when you take, for example, version Keptn 13, it opens you this view. And this view, you can see that it matches basically things by tag. So it displays all Codelab entries which have this tag. It also excludes some items because otherwise it just pushes everything back on the page as well, because this is the default behavior of Codelab. Anything that we also copy all the images. So a separate story. And yeah, one thing with all these filters that something definitely stopped working. I don't know what, but all the things will be fetched just by label. And in tutorials, in principle, you should be able to just disable them. So let me open tutorials again. Starting to get lost. Yeah, tutorials. So in tutorials, for example, yeah, this live demo. It's just yeah, Keptn public demo. So this is basically metadata for what I wanted to remove. And here you can see that there is no longer tag for that. So it shouldn't have been even fetched, but it was. Maybe it's just because we do not clean up the workspace correctly. But yeah, I don't know. It's public JSON. So here we have the tags, but here I believe it was explicitly disabled, maybe not. Currently it's status published, so maybe something changed. But yeah, overall, this is how it should work. So you patch this metadata and you can hide the tutorial through that. You can put additional labels so that it gets fetched correctly. I also tried to use these labels to implement learning paths. So for example, if you click quick start, you get level introduction. Same for full tour, etc. So all of that actually gets through category and sometimes label matching. So that's how it works. So categories are basically here. So we also have parameters, etc. And again, all of that is version dependent. Things are complicated, half broken, but still we need to somehow maintain them. Oh, questions?
I mean, what are we supposed to, so it's broken, can't author in VI, you said.
Well, you can author in VI, but it will be definitely a challenge with all these repositories, with a lot of copy paste, with difficult navigation through all these files. So my strong suggestion would be to consider using something like Visual Studio Code, etc., because it really helps with navigation and previews. I also use Vim for quick patches.
Okay.
yeah, if you want to do some development without previews and other things, I think it will be super complicated for this repository.
Okay, I mean, I'm looking at this stuff. My view is the content of these tutorials is appalling. The structure is appalling. The writing is pretty bad. I mean, how much time do we spend bandaging this versus just start over?
This is actually a good question, because if we could just build something quickly with Antora, maybe it's something we should consider. But yeah, the problem that migration from Markdown to ASCII doc in this case won't be trivial because of all these macros, etc. So you cannot easily automate that. Otherwise, what I would have done, I would have just used pandoc as converter and basically a few GitHub actions, and you would have got everything running. But right now, it doesn't seem to be possible for this particular repository. So yeah, you either create a hard fork of everything, but in this case, it's also a question whether it's just tutorials or the entire documentation side, and whether it's a project of a size you can work on that right now. So this is why, Mac, I just wanted you to study these tools first, study everything before onboarding on this story, because it's going to be a big chunk.
Yeah. Another question. Do we want, apart from what the tools currently are, why do we want tutorials in a repo separate from the rest of the documentation?
I don't.
Okay.
Well, technically, how I would see that, for example, we have, for Prometheus, so Prometheus mostly describes Prometheus integration service. And for them, I would like to see these tutorials actually being integrated to Keptn Contrib. And here we have Prometheus service maintained by Christian and the team. So my vision would be that all documentation for Prometheus service, whether it's tutorial, whether there are docs, pages, etc., going inside this repository, so that whomever does patches, etc., as a part of their pull request, they update documentation as well. So this is what we call documentation as code for real, not keeping docs in Markdown.
Yeah, that's a very good idea, because also the ownership might change a little bit. This is what we have with the same problem with the Dynatrace service in Keptn Contrib, that we're referencing lots of stuff, and if we have lots of snippets in every place, then we basically end up changing something that somebody else needs probably in a different way. And also the Keptn examples come into play then as well, right?
Yeah. So yeah, this is basically how I would like to see. And if you want to take a bite, for example, just putting some tutorials in the repository and see how we could build it with Antora. I actually wanted to do that. So if I ever get a few days of non-interrupted time, this is actually the first thing I would like to do, just rebuild this engine and see how it works. And do not hope to do that. So I'm not sure whether you saw it, Jörg. We actually created the Google Summer of Code project idea for that. We added a project idea, a new documentation site engine, which is basically, basically describing all this runs in text, more or less. And yeah, so as a part of that, we would actually want to rework that. So if you're potentially interested to be a kind of stakeholder, a mentor for this project, but basically, I'm not sure what's the timing, whether we would get accepted to GSOC, whether we would have a student working on that. But regardless, I just want to have to make it happening at some point. Yeah.
Right, because one thing that concerns, I mean, right now it's Dynatrace and Prometheus, but someday there's going to be a lot more of these, right?
Well, the problem that there was a lot more, but it wasn't sustainable. Because if you go to version 0.7, here you get Argo CD, which is essential, which we promote, not tutorial for the recent version, even though even the Keptn team uses Argo CD in some cases. Azure DevOps, important. Yeah, then custom notification service, I think it's obsolete because now we have a webhook service, etc. But okay. Also, installation guidelines, which are again quite important. So if someone asks how to install Keptn on GKE, then this is where you would like to point. But again, this is dated. It's no longer relevant because we mostly moved to Helm charts, etc. And then Minikube, again, important for those who run on a macOS, want to evaluate it. OpenShift, again, important. And we want to have more tutorials for tools, for integrations, but with the current engine is just not sustainable. I mean, we still have an open question who maintains Dynatrace tutorials, I mean, on a regular basis. And with all the current structure, just impossible to actually get it maintained. So it's a huge endeavor.
Because what I think you're saying, like for all, you're talking about putting all the Prometheus stuff into the Prometheus repo, right? And all so the docs repo is the stuff that's sort of neutral, that it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Particularly.
This is correct. Although even with that, there are a few obstacles because we also have this compatibility matrix. And it means that, for example, Prometheus service and hence tutorial would be compatible only with particular version of Keptn. And it means that you actually get into troubles with configuration matrix. Again, I don't think it's a really big problem because I would rather prefer to have just tutorial for the recent version of Prometheus service and for the recent version of Keptn, and that's it. I don't feel strongly about these versions. I mean, whatever. But at least for the recent version, I would like to see it as a kind of running document in the master branch. And for the rest, we can use version tags when it's really reasonable to have a pinned version of the tutorial, maybe a branch.
I mean, I'd like to go back, just looking at it, it seems to me that we've got way too many tutorials that are covering the same material.
Yep.
And then we've got all these things about how you do this, and then we've still got installation stuff stuck into the what's called reference pages for like SLI and SLO, and I mean it's all installation, and that's where we're devoting all our time. And
yep.
what I have not completely, this is my, I think, 4th or 5th week, so I'm still learning on this stuff. But we're all of, I'd like to do a mapping of what we need a tutorial for, what the tasks are, and which of those tasks are generic for everybody and which ones are specific to your Prometheus or your Dynatrace. Is that a nutsy place to start?
Reasonable. Just creating. Yes, sorry. I just wanted right. Just a good first issue. First issues in this repository. Yeah, sorry for the detour, Mac.
Understood.
Yeah, I just try to create these things right away. Okay, so you will basically talking about the specification part, right? I personally think that we should remove the most of version-specific content from here. I mean, any of these things again should go to repositories. So, for example, installation, etc.
Right.
So this just goes straight away to Prometheus service.
Right.
Pretty much the same for Dynatrace. All of the things again go to Dynatrace service, which is basically on the same level here. Then what else do we have on this side? Yeah, then we have all this content, webhook integration, etc. All of that is important, but I don't think that it has to be written as a part of a particular version for the most of cases. Yes, so some content like shipyard, etc. Well, we can aggregate that. But my vision for that would be that once a new release is done, we just freeze the documentation for the previous version, take it from whatever branch or tag, and basically do not touch it unless it's really needed. So we should stop doing these massive patches by developers who have to update multiple versions so that they don't get lost.
Okay, you're sort of losing. I'm not sure what I'm losing
Okay.
you.
Okay, so for example, yeah, I'm just looking. So here we have, for example, patches that update multiple versions. And how it looks like, it's like that. So you have to duplicate all the content for 12s, then update 13s with the same content. And obviously something will get again. Especially when, so it complicates the reviews because you need to update multiple places, and basically makes no much sense to update the older version in the most of the cases, because we recommend using the latest version. Well, basically with 1 month release cycle, I think it's okay for the Keptn and the current stage. We might introduce, let's say, 1 year LTS or whatever later. But maintaining these tutorials, I think that, okay, we release them, we pin them, and then we update everything in the new version.
Okay, yeah. Okay, we're jumping around. So yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I think we go beyond tutorials, but I guess we're on the same page that we need to do something about it. And also there is this page, I have no idea from. So it basically points to all these filters, etc. But it works only as long as we have a default version pinned to elements. If we switch to 13s, then basically things get quite difficult for you because many filters will just provide empty entry. Entry, yeah, you can see that this weird behavior just resets your filters. Okay, so any questions?
Oh, I mean, I have no idea what to do next here.
Yeah, so my suggestion would be to just take newcomer friendly tickets we discussed. So the main point is just to ensure that tooling works for these things. But yeah, I wouldn't expect you to spend too much time on.
Okay, I mean, I was thinking that as I was reading through this stuff, I could fix. There's all sorts of places where like set up one word is used as a verb, and little things like that I could just do that as I go. But
Yeah, I
But you
don't
tell
think
me to
it
do that, I'm
makes
gonna have to
much
go out and
difference.
get Visual Studio and figure out how to use that. And
Yeah, so for me, main recommendation would be to just understanding how it works with the goal of reworking it. Because tutorials as they exist now, they are just, well, basically, we can try to patch them, invest massive effort to keep them running, but I don't think it's right thing to spend time on.
yeah, I
So
mean, it
I would
looks to
just,
me like we had a bunch of engineers who, instead of doing good documentation set, just did all these tutorials.
well,
I mean, most of these are not, I don't see the point of most of these tutorials. You know, when you look at them, it's like, what is the goal here?
well, they're reasonable per se. The problem that, well, it's too many installation steps and not clear what would be the goal. Well, actually, there are quite good introductory things for some cases, saying what we would achieve, etc. But actually, yeah. So
But see, I
until,
wouldn't put that in a tutorial. I would put that in the intro to the product and like the getting. I guess it's whether you write the tutorial, you know, for the tutorial is going to be basically a cookbook sort of thing. Do this and look at this happen, do this and look at this. It's not, look at the architecture. These are all the pieces that go together. We're only going to mention it, you know, it's like that should be in regular guide material.
well, basically, yes. I don't see much difference between guides and tutorials, to be honest. Well, maybe for technical writers there is more difference, but yeah, for
There's a
me,
massive yeah, it's, I mean, it's a whole different, you know, it's a whole different style. And you know, and purpose.
yeah,
These tutorials are full of information that if I'm using the system, I want to go back and reference. A tutorial is something I go through once, maybe twice to get started and get the big picture. And then, and the guide material, I mean, there's a limited amount of guide material that people should be looking at very often. We need really good reference material, and instead of a reference material is written like tutorials and doesn't have, I don't know, somewhere in there. There's those blogs back, you know, I finally saw, you know, a thing for Shipyard, but you know what I'm saying is, yeah, so, and I mean, I don't know then how we, you know, obviously we can't fix everything at once, so how do we go at it? But, so,
Well-
okay, because I was thinking you wanted to really try to get these tutorials straightened up. You just want me to cruise through and get a view of what a mess they are, right?
yep. So yeah, there are two ways. Firstly, yeah, let's say we get something like 1 week of more or less uninterrupted time. We just work together and get the Antora engine running. Or maybe we do it as a part of JSOC, but then, so my concern about having this project in JSOC that if it's done by the end of summer, so it's still multiple months until we actually have it running. So I would consider that if we really seek help for this project, maybe we should go through LFX mentorship.
Yeah.
I think
And
that
all I
yep.
know, I mean, I'm not a tools person, but I also know at CloudBees, just before we merged training and docs, we brought in this guy named Jeremy, who was, as my grandfather said, I'd like to buy him for what I think he's worth and sell him for what he thinks he's worth. He knew it all. They're, you know, there was nothing he did not know more about than anybody else in the world. And the Antora that he was setting up was an absolute disaster. And then we got merged, and that was something that Tammy and Ben actually knew what they were doing, and we just converted over and used their stuff. So that's the one thing that concerns me about doing this with GSOC is, do we get somebody who knows what they're doing enough to set it up right, or do we end up with a,
Well, yeah, I actually reached out to Ben, asked for some expertise. Maybe I will cut this part from the recording, but let's see, I didn't see anything secret. So, okay, if we could get some advice on how CloudBees applied on Terra, maybe if they would be willing to open source the engine.
Probably Tammy is of the why would I do anything for open source standpoint?
But,
So she's not
yeah,
gonna help us and she's not gonna help me, so.
yeah. So let's see. Anyway. No.
But
think we
I don't
were
know,
like-
it's sort of, yeah, it's like, it's just. I mean, there's a stopgap thing of, which is to figure out which of these tutorials are somewhat good or which have information that should be elsewhere. And define what tutorials we need and try to just write those and do them in as a section in the main docs that are there now, and then convert everything to Antora at once.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. So a lot of work, but I think
Yeah.
that it would be great if you could pass through that.
Yeah, well, let me go through and do now that, because I was thinking I was supposed to read this quickly and then I was supposed to update these to work with Mac, which is I'm still fighting the Mac too, so.
Well,
Let
it
me
should
go-
work with Mac. I haven't tried. But yeah, so I'll probably see what's broken in the build engine, because it looks like some hard-coded dependencies on Jurgen's, Google Drive, etc. Actually, this is something I didn't see by today's meeting, so I have no
That's it, it's
idea.
just gonna get deeper and deeper here.
So I have no idea what actually gets displayed, but we know for a
Right.
fact that the tutorial still works. But
Okay,
can-
off the top of our heads.
Yeah.
Now, what I do see is we need a good tutorial that quickly gets me a non-production environment, something I can install on my laptop using K3D. And I get Keptn and I have something else.
I strongly suggest looking at the tutorial created by Adam.
Right, no, I'm just, let's
Mhm.
not fill it in. I'm just saying, let's say we have nothing. We have something, but let's say we have nothing. What tutorials do we need? And
Yeah,
that's one
so
that we need,
yeah,
is to get Keptn installed on K3D. For non-production.
K3D on Docker, but the
Mhm.
thing that get running it quickly. So currently, how I envisioned it, it would be a learning path of 3 items. Again, something good broken here, because there were 4 tutorials. So basically, the idea was for learning paths that you start from quick start or maybe watching it live. So it's currently disabled on this page. Then you go through full tour, and then you explore some particular use cases like quality gates, etc., for separate tutorials. Regarding the installation, so quick start is what we actually need in any case. The current quick start is it's focusing basically on installing Keptn with a few other items. So you see that steps are really small because it actually points here, the Keptn website.
Right.
Again, it's something called I just had to quick patch. But yeah, this is basically what I rewritten in December, and it used to work. Yeah, it uses
Okay.
K3D, etc. But still it's quite heavy. So this is minimum requirement. And even on this minimum requirement, it doesn't work. So what what Adam created, he created a tutorial that is based basically on a Kubernetes and Docker kind instead of K3D. It's much more lightweight. Well, it's still quite heavy, but it gets you quickly to a hello world running.
Okay.
So my recommendation would be to actually consider. So, well, sorry, it's not that one. It's also a good one, but not the one I wanted to show. Second. I can't remember one. Well, actually, it points to this one. So I will double check. But yeah, anyway, there is another one which is Hello World. So this one basically shows how to set up Keptn in kind out of the box. And there is another new tutorial which shows just Keptn this kind. I need to find it, but it's also quite useful. So I'll definitely find it.
And now the part one of Christian's video that he did a couple of weeks ago, the second part is really development environment. But I think the first part is just getting your Keptn part up. And
Yeah,
I think
let's
it would work.
focus on the user story, because developer environment is for contributing. It's also important, but it's a separate flow.
That's what I'm saying. Part two of his videos is developer. I think part one, which says it's, but I think it is, I don't think it's wrong for the user environment. It just gets Keptn up, but it's a video.
Maybe.
And I wondered why, because he deliberately split it into two videos, and I think that may be the case.
So yeah, for the tutorials, sorry, I had to go into my inbox to find it quickly. So yeah, there is a repository called the kind Keptn. So again, it's a separate repository, and it basically bootstraps Keptn in Docker right away. So and just show it. There you go.
So can we just start using this right away?
Yep. So I'm just going to show it to you. Let's see what so it will need to pull the image. Also interesting. So maybe there is a bug in this tutorial, or Adam hasn't deployed the Docker image. So what I'm going to do, I will just take latest. Maybe it's something related to permissions, etc. I will report it to Adam. And looks like this repository doesn't exist at all anymore. But yeah, once it's getting, it just creates a Keptn hello world in kind, and you need just need to have a machine with Docker, so the rest will be automatically.
So, and this is something, it's a Docker container that gives you Keptn that's small enough that a reasonable person could put it on their laptop.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm just looking into the repository, and I see that Adam didn't deploy 0.0.5. So I believe it's just his local machine right now.
Okay.
But what I know now that I can use 0.0.4, and maybe it will start. Oh, yeah, it's going.
Doing something.
Oh, it's still pulling the image. I will just show how it looks like from user perspective. So you can see that it does Keptn installation, etc. Okay. So you can see that it takes Keptn, it uses K3D, etc. And for that it will use kind. This name already exists. I'm not sure whether it will continue after that.
You already have a cluster with that name.
Yeah, so it's also something I will probably need to report to this repository. But I think that in principle, it would be really good to start a demo if you could get it working properly. I will suggest that we actually move it to sandbox if Adam agrees. But yeah, it's one of the ways to actually bootstrap things easily. Somebody was making notes as usual.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, then it will be your homework.
You did the one screen, but I was looking at minuscule type flying by really fast and listening to you trying to
Yeah,
absorb
it's
it,
perfectly
and
fine.
yeah.
So I'm just high agenda, Keptn start. So let's go back to our side. Okay, so
Do
I
we want
just
to put on that list the strong possibility that we should just abandon the tutorials repo and whatever we're doing?
yeah. So moving
Where there's all
to,
that jargon stuff and
to documentation as code.
what is the source for what Adam did? Is what Adam did in Markdown?
What this one?
The tutorial we were just looking at, yeah.
It's just here in the repository. It was basically Readme MD.
Oh, this is the Readme MD
Yep.
for the repository. Oh, okay, no comment about that. But it
Why
is.
not?
But it's
I think
MD.
well, for simple demo, it's perfectly fine. So you have a simple description, you have all the content, it's self-contained. So I don't have any issues with it. And basically, this is the trigger he uses. So basically, sending this cloud event will trigger the execution. Okay, and this demo also broke. So I have a really bad luck today. But yeah, what? So after all the things happening, so also Kubernetes setup, I guess. So definitely this tutorial will also need some polishing if you want to do that.
All right.
You don't have
Do you know
big
why
quantity.
Adam wrote this? I mean, did he have a specific purpose for writing this, or?
Well, firstly, showing everything from kind. Because again, our tutorials are super heavy. It requires users to set up Kubernetes. I mean, it's always a challenge. So he took kind because this kind you can actually use native Docker image. Can't find on. After I disabled it, it will show so that I need to disable it, right? So I will probably play around with this tutorial after the meeting because I actually want to get it running again. But yeah, I think it's a good bet to actually have a lightweight starter. Yeah, and now it's just requires cleaning up everything manually because the setup script isn't fault tolerant. So when something fails in the middle, you are basically screwed.
All right. Yeah, it would be nice if we could have that the Docker thing, and then in the other places, like I think like the SOL and SLI, what are called reference pages, they begin with telling you how to get Keptn up and running on K3D. Or I mean, there's installation instructions everywhere, and
so my suggestion is that yeah, you just study this engine a bit, prepare your development environment, But I think that our plan is to move out of this as soon as possible. And if it helps, I would be happy to just prioritize it and to get it done.
Except you're already, without doing that, remember, if we burn you out again, I'm gonna have people from 2 different companies after me with pitchforks and God knows what else.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
we
let's say
can't burn you out again. And after what you went through last year, I've got to think you're fragile.
well, I'm still going through it.
And you're still going through it, yeah. So let's be realistic about what you can do here.
Yeah, I understand.
So,
And yeah, thanks for your concern. I actually agree with you.
but I know
We'll-
this, but I mean, the thing is with you also, what you thrive on is doing stuff like this. So, we'll just be careful. I'm not saying don't do it, but,
Okay.
so, okay, so I'm doing analysis only for now, and I'm not even worrying about trying to fix this. I'm just scoping out what's
Yes,
here. and-
scoping, maybe just writing some really simple contributing guide pointing to this recording and some basic steps. So definitely no need to write something extensive.
Right. Well, like you said, what I did, well, what I started with the contributing, I'm just going through and reading everything and noting what's where and making comments. And I did something like that with the reference pages and stuff. I haven't gone through everything, but I'll go through, because as I say, some of these tutorials have some really good information that I don't think belongs in a tutorial, but it belongs someplace else where people can find it. So,
Yep. But yeah, right now I just think it's a wasted effort to rebuild the documentation with the current thing. So I would just create a spin-off docs Keptn.io based on Hugo, sorry, based on Antora, and then actually think what do we do with the rest of the content remaining for Hugo, but maybe moving over the things.
right. Actually, I don't know. For Antora, I think where you get into, it's more the implementation when you start having a lot of text that you reuse and stuff. I'm not sure how big a job it would be, but I can convert Markdown to Antora or to ASCII Doctor pretty easily.
Yeah, it's pretty easy by default. I mean,
And what I'm thinking is, I think a fairly simple Antora implementation would let us do ASCII doc versions of the Markdown files that we've got now pretty easily. Then it gets fussier as we start having, all the different stuff that we pull in, but maybe that's the thing, is that we do a quickie just to get everything into ASCII doc under Antora. And then
actually what we could try ASCII doc. We could start just a new repository, docs, Keptn docs .github.io. So I could create a simple GitHub action that just shows the thing. So it would be kind of our sandbox to play around. For example, we could offer Adam to be a kind of pilot project to be moved to the new tutorial, to the new documentation portal.
right. And actually, because right now the tutorials are in their own repo. So if we set up a new repo, which is actually beginning of our Antora set.
Yeah, I think we set up a new repo for documentation. Deliberately, we plan to not put too much content there. Basically, using Antora as a build engine, putting things from elsewhere through references, and just putting these references in place.
Yeah.
I will
And that
call
would
it.
save you finding all the stuff that's in Jürgen's private repos, etc. And I wouldn't have to learn Trust me, I can do a lot of conversion to ASCII Doctor for what it's going to take me to learn to use Visual Studio.
Well, the problem is not with conversion. The problem is with putting documentation in the right place.
Right.
Also, we will have a question about Readme files, because Readme files for services are also hosted on Artifact Hub. So you cannot just switch to ASCII doc if it's not supported in Artifact Hub. well, artifact hub script is also kind of, yeah, well, it's not dark magic, it's quite straightforward. But I would rather be careful and maybe start from supporting Markdown in the Antora engine, so that we can gradually move over the things.
That's right. Antora will build Markdown, won't it?
Well,
you don't get all the features, all the facilities, but
yeah, there are tools for that.
But what back to, but I'm sure someplace we're going to have someplace on the web or in the doc set where it says tutorials. And then if we have some tutorial information in Prometheus and in the Dynatrace, are those going to get referenced from there?
I think so.
Or yeah,
time.
okay.
So maybe I will spend some time today to create this POC, because well, now I am excited. Maybe it will take 30 minutes to have a POC running. Let's see.
That would be fairly exciting. If
Okay.
As long as you're having fun. All I ask is at the point that you're not having fun and starting to feel stressed, walk away.
Well, I wanted to work on that for 2 months, because every time I look at these tutorials and this documentation, I just want to nuke it from the orbit. Well, I guess nuking anything is not a good joke these days. But yeah, otherwise I want to get rid of it.
Right. It's like when I look at the other docs, I mean, yeah, and it's like there's so much, there's stuff, you know, I can't do internal cross references very well in Markdown, and I can't make inline comments and, you know, this sort of stuff. But there is stuff could incrementally work on. But yeah, when you're looking at these tutorials, it's like this needs to just be started over from scratch. And we need the README for this new repo needs to specifically define what a tutorial is and when you can write a new tutorial. And it's the fact that an existing tutorial lacks 10% of what you want, you do not write a new tutorial, you fix the existing one. That we've got too much of that going on, so. Excellent. Okay, so we have a plan, only you have to promise me that if you start feeling really stressed, you walk away from it.
Okay, yeah, I make no commitment. I'm just making notes. I will publish it to docs, and once the POC is ready, maybe we could get other contributors.
Yeah. Yeah, once there's a repo, well, I could take some file and put it over there and switch it to ASCII doc. Or you're saying just build Markdown initially, right? And do ASCII doc to conversion next? Okay. Well, anything you want, if you want, you should not be spending the time converting files from Markdown to ASCII doc.
Oh, well, I will probably create an engine that converts them right away, because we already have experience with Pandoc and with creating GitHub actions for Jenkins. So this is what I will do here as well. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Okay, this was fun. And now I have a better idea of what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just reading this crap and it's like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? So now I know what to do. Fabulous. So this is probably it for you, I hear. Well, they said in Vienna they take Friday afternoon off. Is that true in Switzerland also?
Well, not really.
Okay.
I mean, in my case, I won't work too much today because I have some other things to do.
Yeah.
Almost made my hours this week. But otherwise, I will play around. And for me, Friday is always something like hacking time. So I don't have meetings, any meetings left for today, which excites me a lot.
Good. And hiking, I think, de-stresses you, right? Does that help you calm down? Yeah, a little bit.
Well, this is definitely something. Hiking, running, etc. Sounds like a good thing to work.
What's your weather like? You still have a lot of snow, right?
Not
is it cold?
So yeah, in Neuchâtel, all snow is melted except the mountain, so you can still go. Okay. 700 meters up from my place and still remain in Neuchâtel city. So there is snow, but on my elevation level, no.
So will you go up to where the snow is, or are you starting to see anything like spring or?
Yeah, well, here it's spring. I can send you photos later
Yeah,
if I want to send Keptn chat. But yeah, that's it.
cool. Well, go off, have a wonderful weekend.
Okay.
And we will talk next week,
Mm-hmm.
or unless you have something, I'll be watching Slack over the weekend too, don't worry, if you need something before that. So ping me if you need me. Thank you so much for all of this.
Mm-hmm. You too.
Take care,
So-
have a great weekend.
You too. I will get the video published as soon as it renders. It's quite a long one, so maybe 1 hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fabulous, bye.